There is a way of facing hardship that has allowed countless people to endure storms that would have broken others, a quiet strength woven into their character long before anyone ever sees the battles they fight. You've probably met someone like that, a person who walked through circumstances so heavy that most would have collapsed, yet somehow they kept moving forward. Maybe it's someone in your family, someone you once admired from afar, or someone whose story found its way to you at exactly the right moment. What separates them isn't luck, it isn't talent, and it certainly isn't that their path was easier. It's that while the world panics at the first sign of discomfort, they remain steady. While others complain, they endure. While most look for a way out, they look for a way through. Very few realize it, but this kind of inner strength aligns closely with an old Japanese idea known as Gaman, a quiet philosophy that has shaped ordinary individuals into remarkably resilient human beings. Gaman isn't about hype, motivation, or temporary surges of willpower. It's not about pretending life is painless or forcing yourself to smile when you feel like breaking. It is something far deeper, a discipline embedded into how you carry yourself. It teaches that suffering is not always avoidable, but how you walk through it defines who you become. When you understand this, the world stops feeling like an enemy you must outrun and starts feeling like a test you were built to pass. Many people who embody this strength have never heard the word Gaman, yet their actions mirror its principles, enduring the unbearable without losing their dignity, maintaining self-control when everything feels chaotic, choosing steady perseverance over emotional outbursts or complaints, and continuing forward without seeking pity or recognition. It is resilience so silent that most people overlook it, but its power is undeniable. And that is the path we explore here, the same path many have followed with the help of the reflections shared on Wisdom Timeless Path, where resilience is not a performance, but a way of living. Every message, every lesson, every story you hear is meant to strengthen that quiet part of you, the part that refuses to break. This philosophy, this ancient endurance, is what we're going to unfold together today. Chapter 1: The Weight of the World on Our Shoulders. The story begins with a boy named David, 16 years old, still technically a child, yet already carrying concerns that most adults struggle to face, living his second year of high school with the distant hope that 3 more years of it might unlock the doors to college. Nothing about his life arrived wrapped in comfort. He wasn't starving, but his family lived in that fragile space where bills never quite meet, where luxuries do not exist, and where the smallest misstep can cause everything to crack. And overshadowing all of it was the absence of a father who walked away long before David understood what abandonment truly meant, leaving behind a silence that reshaped the entire household. From that day forward, it was just him, his mother, and his 2 younger siblings, a small unit surviving on the strength of a woman who worked 2 jobs and left home before the sun had even begun to warm the sky. She returned each night when the moon had long taken its place, wearing on her face the kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot erase, the exhaustion that grows when someone must stay strong for everyone else without the luxury of falling apart themselves. It was this sight, repeated day after day, that carved a shift inside David, something quiet but irreversible. No one needed to tell him to step up. No one needed to hand him responsibility. He simply saw his mother's swollen feet, her thin smile stretched over fatigue, and he made a promise so silent that even he barely heard it. But he felt it burning every time he breathed. I will give her a better life. I will give all of us a better life. But he had nothing. No savings, no contacts, no shortcuts. What he did have was a mind that refused to fold and a determination sharp enough to ache. So he decided that education would be his escape route. If he studied hard enough, entered a good university, and kept fighting, maybe the future could look different. So he began studying beyond the usual homework, diving into exam preparation, pushing himself into unfamiliar territory where ambition demanded more discipline than he thought he had. Life, however, showed little concern for his plans. Every afternoon, he worked part-time at a supermarket for 4 hours, and that money went straight into keeping the household standing: bills, groceries, essentials. His schedule became a cycle that left almost no space to breathe. He woke at 5:30 a.m., attended school at 7, left at 2, worked from 4 to 8, returned home to help his mother with his siblings, studied until he could no longer keep his eyes open, and finally slept around midnight. 5 hours of rest became normal. Still, he forced himself to exercise because he knew that if he got sick, everything else would collapse with him. The first month nearly broke him. He woke up tired, drifted asleep on top of open books, arrived late to work, and struggled to study for tests. By the second week, quitting the extra study sessions seemed tempting. By the fourth, the thought hammered louder. Maybe college is for people who have time. I need money now. But just when giving up felt almost logical, he sought out his history teacher, a quiet older woman whose eyes held the kind of understanding that doesn't need words, the kind of understanding that made him feel, perhaps for the first time, truly seen. Sometimes we learn that strength isn't built in grand victories, but in the moments when we carry more than we think we can, whispering to ourselves that stopping isn't an option, even when no one is watching. And maybe that's what growing up really is, discovering that the weight on our shoulders becomes lighter not because life softens, but because we become someone who can hold what once felt impossible, someone shaped quietly by responsibility, love, and the courage to keep going. Chapter 2. The conversation that changed everything. David stood at the doorway of her classroom, hesitant but desperate, and when he finally knocked and asked, "Professor, may I speak with you?" she simply nodded and motioned for him to take a seat. The moment he sat down, something inside him finally cracked open. He began speaking without filters or structure, pouring out the exhaustion he had been holding in for months. He told her about his mother's endless shifts, his siblings, the job that ate away his afternoons, the studies he wanted so badly to continue but felt himself slipping from, and the suffocating thought that maybe he should abandon the dream altogether. They weren't close. She wasn't the kind of teacher he confided in. But the pressure inside him had grown too heavy, and she was the first person who felt safe enough to receive it. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer cliches or pretend solutions. She listened the way someone listens when they understand the weight of silence, her expression calm, patient, unhurried. When he finally fell quiet, she took a deep breath and said something that startled him with its gentleness. "David, do you know why I understand exactly what you're feeling?" He shook his head, confused. "My parents were Japanese," she began. "They fled Japan during the war and eventually reached the United States when it ended. I was born here, but they were treated like outsiders. To be Japanese in that era was to carry a target on your back." Her voice softened as her gaze drifted somewhere far behind him into a memory that still carried weight. They couldn't find jobs, doors closed everywhere. There were days when we truly starved, not metaphorically, but literally. She paused, letting those words settle between them. "And do you know what I heard my parents whisper every night?" David waited. "Gaman." She let the word linger in the space between them. "It means to endure with dignity," she explained. "To carry suffering without bitterness. To continue even when everything feels impossible." Then she leaned closer, her tone shifting, not to instruct but to reveal something personal. "When I grew older and thought about dropping out of college, I was terrified too. Terrified of failing, of being inadequate, of proving every doubter right. And my parents sat me down. They explained that Gaman isn't just silent endurance. It is the understanding that temporary suffering is the price we pay for lasting transformation." David felt something stir deep in his chest, not confidence, but recognition. "Do you think I can do it?" he asked quietly. She held his gaze. "David, you're already living Gaman. You work, you study, you care for your family. You rise every day without complaint. You don't need to learn persistence. You only need to understand what your persistence already means." There are moments when a single truth slips quietly into your life and rearranges everything you thought you knew about yourself, revealing a strength you never recognized because you were too busy surviving to notice it. And in that quiet realization, you begin to understand that perseverance is not a burden others place on your shoulders, but a promise you make to your future self. A promise to rise, to continue, to grow into someone who refuses to surrender. That understanding becomes the kind of courage that carries you far beyond where fear once stopped you. Chapter 3: The Research That Opened His Eyes. That night, when the rest of the house sank into its usual quiet, David sat at the small kitchen table with his old laptop and typed the word Gaman into the search bar. He read for hours, long past the moment his eyelids began to burn, until the screen turned blurry and the clock glowed 2 a.m. What he found surprised him. Gaman wasn't a command to stay silent or to bury emotions until they hardened into numbness. It wasn't about pretending life didn't hurt. It was about recognizing the pain honestly, accepting that the challenge was real, and still choosing to move forward without losing the respect you hold for yourself. The more he read, the deeper the idea settled. And then he found something else. 2 other Japanese principles that struck him with the force of revelation: Kaizen and Ikigai. Kaizen, the practice of becoming just a little better each day, even 1%, even if the progress is small enough to feel invisible, because consistency builds a future in ways perfection never will. Ikigai, the reason your heart wakes you each morning, the quiet purpose that gives shape to your days. Suddenly, everything aligned in his mind. His Ikigai was simple but powerful: to give his mother and siblings a life gentler than the one they had endured. Kaizen would be his method, the daily rhythm of incremental growth. And Gaman would be the force that held everything steady when life became punishing. He opened a notebook and wrote on the first page, pressing the pen deeper with every word: I will persevere with dignity, grow 1% each day, and do it for the people I love. In the stillness of a late night, a person can uncover a truth that feels almost like hearing their own voice for the first time. A quiet understanding that purpose, progress, and endurance are not separate paths, but threads woven into the same inner fabric. And once that connection becomes clear, the struggle ahead no longer feels like punishment, but like the shaping of someone you are slowly becoming. Someone who learns to rise through intention rather than circumstance, carrying forward a strength built one steady breath at a time. Chapter 4: Redesigning Life. The next morning, David didn't rise with a burst of excitement or some cinematic surge of motivation. That kind of energy burns out too fast, and he already understood that well. What woke him was a quieter force, a decision he had made the night before, one that felt heavier, steadier, and far more permanent. He sat at his desk before anyone else stirred in the house and began designing a plan, not the kind filled with unrealistic promises or the vague hope that tomorrow he'd magically feel stronger, but something grounded, something he could actually live. Wake up at 5 a.m., not 5:15. At 5, move his body for 15 minutes. No gym memberships, no special equipment, just push-ups, squats, maybe a short run around the block. Simple was sustainable. From 5:15 to 6, mathematics. From 6 to 6:45, shower, breakfast, help his siblings. By 7, school. By 2, done. 3 to 3:30, a little more study. 4 to 8, work. 8:30 to 9, dinner, helping his mother. 9 to 10:30, SAT prep. By 11, sleep. 6 hours, not perfect, but survivable, and for now, enough. He stared at the schedule, feeling the weight of what he had just committed to, a weight that pressed down on him but didn't suffocate. Beneath it, something else rose. Clarity, the kind he had been missing for months. He knew that some days his routine would falter. Some days he might cut a workout short or barely squeeze in a study session. But that was the meaning of Kaizen. 1 push-up instead of 20, a 5-minute jog instead of 15, a small step on the days when big ones weren't possible. Consistency, not perfection. Progress, not performance. A life begins to shift the moment you understand that discipline doesn't require grand gestures, only the quiet courage to remake your days with intention, even when no one is watching. And as each small choice stacks gently on the one before it, you start to see that becoming the person you hope to be isn't an act of force, but of alignment. A slow, steady rearranging of your habits until your life finally reflects the strength you've carried inside all along. Chapter 5: The Internal War. The first week unfolded exactly as David expected. Harsh, unforgiving, the kind of grind that makes every muscle protest and every thought try to bargain its way out of responsibility. His body craved more sleep, dragging him down with a heaviness he could feel in his bones. His mind whispered temptations the moment he opened his eyes. Just today. Sleep a little longer. You can make up for it tomorrow. Every argument sounded reasonable, every excuse perfectly timed. But he remembered what Gaman meant. He paused, inhaled slowly, and repeated to himself the words that had become his anchor. I endure this with dignity. This temporary discomfort is the price of the life I want. By the second week, something shifted. His body seemed to understand the rhythm he was forcing into it, waking sometimes even before the alarm rang. The exhaustion remained, but it was no longer an enemy, just a companion he learned to walk beside. By the third week, the morning exercise stopped feeling like punishment and began to feel like a ritual, a small victory that set the tone for the rest of the day. After a month, the routine wasn't flawless, but it was functioning. His grades rose. His manager noticed his consistency. At home, his mother saw a steadiness in him, a focus that hadn't been there before. Yet progress never runs uninterrupted. The first real challenge arrived, harsh and unexpected, reminding him of a truth he had only begun to understand. Nothing in life unfolds exactly as planned. And when things break, shift, or fall apart, that is when you face the moment that truly matters, the choice to keep going or to give in. A person begins to understand themselves in the moments when comfort disappears and the mind turns against its own intentions, revealing how fragile discipline can feel when life applies pressure. Yet beneath all the resistance, there is always a deeper voice, the one that keeps rising after every setback, insisting that strength is not built on perfect days, but on the days when you choose to continue anyway. And when you learn to follow that voice, even trembling, you become someone your old self never believed you could be. Chapter 6. When everything falls apart. 3 months into his new routine, life delivered the kind of blow that doesn't ask for permission. David's younger brother fell sick, a sudden high fever that frightened the whole household. His mother had no choice but to miss work and rush him to the hospital. Without hesitation, David stepped in and covered her shift at one of her jobs, working a full 12 hours on top of everything else. By the time he walked through the door that night, it was nearly 11 p.m., and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. When the alarm rang at 5 a.m., he reached over and turned it off, lying there in the dim quiet, staring at the ceiling as fatigue washed through him. His body begged for rest, every instinct telling him to stay in bed. Yet something deeper stirred, a reminder he had carved into his identity. Gaman is not about how I feel, it is about who I choose to be. So he rose, not heroically, not effortlessly, but intentionally. He did 10 push-ups instead of 20. He studied for 20 minutes instead of 45. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't nothing. And that mattered. The river didn't stop moving just because the water slowed. The following week, he fell ill himself. 2 days of fever, aching joints, a fogged mind. He couldn't do his full routine, but he did what he could. Small actions, minimal steps. But he refused to let the chain break. It was then that he understood a truth far more valuable than any motivational speech. Progress is not defined by how much you do when life is easy, but by what you refuse to abandon when life becomes hard. People who persevere aren't the ones who never fall. They are the ones who have already decided who they are, long before the challenge arrives. And once identity is fixed, behavior follows with remarkable clarity. There comes a point when you realize that the days that break your rhythm are the very days that reveal who you've been becoming in silence. The days when strength no longer looks like intensity, but like the smallest act of defiance against everything pulling you down. And in that quiet defiance, that decision to continue, even imperfectly, you discover a version of yourself that does not crumble when life shifts. A self built on identity rather than emotion. A self capable of rising even when rising feels impossible. Chapter 7. The Turning Point. By the time David reached his junior year, just 1 year away from graduation, his life had settled into a rhythm that most people would consider unbearable. School, work, studying, caring for his siblings, supporting his mother. The days blended together in a cycle of effort that rarely gave him a moment to catch his breath. But something else began to happen. People around him started to notice. "Dude, you never miss anything," the classmates said. How do you do it? David never quite knew how to answer. How do you explain Gaman to someone who has never had to hold their life together piece by piece just to survive? How do you describe endurance to someone who has never needed it? One quiet Sunday morning, while washing a neighbor's car to earn a bit of extra money, an unexpected thought emerged. The neighbor always complimented his work: fast, precise, careful. "David, you should do this professionally," she said. "I'd pay you for it." That single comment planted a seed. So he started washing cars on weekends. Nothing ambitious, just a few jobs here and there. But he quickly realized this could become something more than pocket money. The next week, he washed another neighbor's car, then another. Soon, word traveled. He created simple flyers using the library computer. Weekend car wash, quality service, fair price. He walked the neighborhood and slipped them into mailboxes. That first month, he gained 3 regular clients, $50 per car, $150 per week, $600 per month. It wasn't wealth, but it was momentum. He kept his supermarket job, but he funneled the new income into better supplies, higher quality wax, specialized shampoo, a stronger vacuum. His work improved. Clients recommended him. 3 became 8. 8 became 15. By the 3rd month, his small weekend side job had become something structured, reliable, and surprisingly successful. It wasn't luck. It wasn't talent. It was Kaizen, the discipline of being just a little better today than he was yesterday. It was Gaman, the dignity of showing up fully, even when life was heavy. And slowly, the world began to respond. At a certain point, you begin to see that every small act of dedication is quietly shaping a version of you that no one else can fully understand. A version built from early mornings, tired evenings, and the decision to keep giving your best even when no one is watching. And when that inner shift becomes undeniable, you realize that the world responds not to noise or intention, but to the silent proof of who you are becoming. A person whose consistency creates opportunities long before you feel ready for them. Chapter 8. The Impossible Decision. By senior year, the final stretch before adulthood began, David's life looked nothing like the life he'd started with. His small weekend car washing service had grown into something structured and reliable. 25 regular clients, entire weekends spent working. 2 friends hired to help, paid fairly by the hour, and still enough profit left over to support his family. What began as survival money had become a real business. But then came college application season. He sent applications to 3 universities, each offering financial aid to low-income students. His grades were solid, his discipline unmistakable, and in his personal essay, he wrote openly about Gaman, about enduring with dignity, about working, studying, and protecting his family all at once. 3 months later, the letter arrived, a full scholarship to a state university. His mother cried in a way he had never seen, her face folding with relief rather than sorrow, tears that carried the weight of years she had spent fighting alone. But joy was followed by a dilemma. The car washing business was thriving. On weekends alone, he earned more than a month's pay at the supermarket. He could expand, hire more people, turn it into something real, or he could go to college and let the business slowly fade. Neither option felt wrong. Neither option felt simple. One night, he sat with his mother and said quietly, "Mom, I can do both. I can study and still run the business on weekends." She held his hand with that tired gentleness only a mother carries. "David, you've already done more than any mother could ask. You've been working since you were 16. You take care of your siblings. You've made me proud every single day. Now go to college, learn, grow. The business can wait." But David had learned something from Gaman that couldn't be forgotten. Perseverance isn't choosing the easy path. It is choosing the right one, even when it's the hardest. So he answered her softly, "Mom, I will do both. Not because I must, but because I can." And here's something worth noticing, something many people only learn through experience. Sometimes your parents, despite loving you deeply, won't fully understand your vision, your goals, or the intensity with which you chase them. They may guide you toward the path that feels safest, most stable, or most familiar. But growth rarely happens in the safe places. Sometimes achieving your dreams means choosing the harder road, even when the people you love urge you toward the easier one. Not recklessly, but with intelligence, courage, and a clear understanding of what truly matters to you. Every life eventually arrives at a crossroads where comfort and calling pull in opposite directions, and the choice you make in that moment quietly defines who you will become. It's in that tension between what feels safe and what feels true that you discover whether your dreams are merely wishes or responsibilities you're willing to carry. And when you choose the path that demands more of you, not because you are forced to, but because you recognize your own potential, you step into a future shaped by courage rather than fear. Chapter 9: The Result of Perseverance. David entered college with the same determination that had carried him through those relentless high school years. He chose business administration, not just because it interested him, but because he wanted to strengthen the foundation of the small but growing enterprise he refused to abandon. Weekends were no longer quiet. The car wash continued, expanding even as homework and exams filled his weekdays. By the end of his first year, he had 40 clients and 5 part-time employees. By the second year, he opened a small physical location. Nothing fancy, but functional, consistent, and profitable. By the third year, he managed 2 locations, each running with a level of discipline that reflected the principles he had lived long before he studied them. Everything he learned in class, he applied immediately. Marketing strategies increased visibility. Management principles improved efficiency. Financial knowledge taught him how to invest rather than merely earn. And slowly, the business transformed from a weekend hustle into something stable and scalable. 4 years later, when graduation finally arrived, the numbers shocked even him. $20,000 a month in revenue. His mother no longer needed to work 2 jobs. The family debts were gone. His siblings studied in a school he once only dreamed of. Their lives had shifted because he refused to let his own dreams die. When people asked him how he managed it, David always smiled and gave the same answer: Gaman. I endured with dignity when quitting felt like the only sensible choice. Because the truth is simple. The distance between a stagnant life and a transformed one is rarely defined by talent or opportunity. It is defined by the ability to continue when every logical reason tells you to stop. At some point, you come to understand that the rewards of perseverance are never sudden. They appear quietly, almost shyly, after years of choosing effort over ease, purpose over comfort, identity over emotion. And when you finally stand in a life reshaped by your own discipline, you realize the real victory wasn't the success you built, but the person you became while building it. Someone who learned that endurance, carried with dignity, has the power to rewrite the future in ways talent never could. Chapter 10. The truth about Gaman. Gaman has never been about shutting down your emotions or pretending that everything in your life is perfectly under control. It has nothing to do with becoming numb, empty, or robotic. Its power comes from something far more human: the recognition that life will knock you down, that adversity will press against you from every angle, and that you will face moments where giving up feels not only tempting but reasonable. And yet, despite all of that, you rise anyway. You continue anyway. You choose the path of dignity and self-respect even when the world offers you easier exits. David had nights when exhaustion broke through the cracks of his strength. Nights when he cried quietly so his siblings wouldn't hear. Days when the pressure felt unbearable, when doubt swarmed, when discouragement pressed like a weight on his chest. There were mornings when his body trembled with fatigue, and evenings when hope felt thin. But he refused to break the chain. He refused to create a pause that could swallow everything he had worked for. The river of effort kept moving, even when the current slowed, and that consistency shaped everything that came after. The question that now rests in your hands is simple but demanding. Are you willing to bring Gaman into your own life? Because the truth is uncomfortable. It will hurt. It will require sacrifices you don't want to make. There will be days when you doubt yourself. Days when frustration tries to convince you that nothing is working. Days when the easy path whispers seductively. But when you understand that temporary suffering is the price of permanent transformation, the struggle becomes meaningful instead of cruel. When you identify your Ikigai, the reason your life leans forward, and commit to Kaizen, becoming just 1% better each day, and support all of it with Gaman, the quiet perseverance that holds your dignity intact, something shifts inside you. You stop being someone who survives and begin becoming someone who shapes their own direction. David wasn't gifted. He wasn't extraordinary. He simply had people who depended on him, a life that pushed him to grow, and a decision he renewed every single day. I will not give up. And that simple declaration transformed everything. The strength of those who never quit has nothing to do with fearlessness. It comes from purpose. It comes from the quiet, steady vow you whisper to yourself every morning. No matter what happens today, I will persevere with dignity. That is Gaman. And once it becomes part of who you are, you discover a power within yourself you never knew existed. In the quiet moments when no one else is there to witness your struggle, you begin to understand that endurance is less about toughness and more about honors you've made to yourself, the one your future depends on. And as each day asks you again whether you are willing to rise, you'll find that the answer comes not from motivation, but from identity, from the truth you've chosen to live by. When that truth is rooted in purpose, even your smallest actions become acts of courage, carrying you toward a life shaped by strength rather than circumstance. If this story moves something inside you, carry its strength into tomorrow. And if you want more lessons like this, stay close to Wisdom Timeless Path.